Yeah,
Sorry, did you see what
yes,
I sent you, the message I sent you about
I
lighting?
did.
Okay.
We're gonna do it shorter.
All right. Awesome. I will mute myself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Danielle. I am the outreach coordinator for Northwest Veg. And today we're going to be doing dips. And so we decided to do a hot dip and a cold dip and just ubiquitous favorites across the board. So we're going to be doing queso and ranch. So these are things that most folks are probably familiar with having eaten, and then also you might be able to mix up a couple of options. I know certainly for some of the salty older vegans or folks who have been vegan for a long time, these were things that could have been very elusive when you first started to go dairy free. So maybe you haven't checked in for a while. There certainly is plenty of ranch options out there. But if you're looking to make your own, I'm going to talk about a couple of tips and tricks and some just hacks in general that we can do to have these dips come out however it is that you want. So we're going to start with the queso, just so that way we've got that going. So I've got a red pepper here. And just to review our ingredients that we're going to be putting in this, we're going to put in a little bit of red pepper, a little bit of onion. I've got a can of diced green chilies. All of, this is all optional. I would definitely do at the bare minimum, I would do onion and garlic for what we're going to be sauteing. I know it feels, if you watch this series regularly, you probably feel like Danielle always has tomatoes that are on their last leg. And it's true, I do. So I've got some tomatoes. I'm going to be putting those in to make kind of a chunky queso today. So those are the fresher ingredients. And then I'm actually going to be using some of the minced wet garlic. And I know I normally use dried, but for this, since this is something that's going to have a more liquidy consistency, and I'm looking for the garlic to kind of have an accent and not be in the forefront of flavor, that I'm going to be using fresh garlic because it packs a little bit less of a punch. So we're going to be using fresh garlic. And then whatever other seasonings, you can put in a little bit of taco seasoning, anything like that. And then for helping create our liquids, we're going to be using unsweetened almond milk. If you use soy milk, I mean, you can get away with it, but it is going to have kind of a sweeter hint to it. So if you're looking for something that has almost a neutral palate, it's going to be unflavored almond milk. And then for sauteing in, we're going to be using Earth Balance. And that helps us just saute everything. This is a great opportunity. You could absolutely use water. You could use broth for that. And then for the cheese, I am going to be using, today I'm going to be using BioLife. Now, I specifically chose mozzarella just because I find that the mozzarella in the vegan cheeses, and I've tried this with several varieties, it creates the cheesy texture very well without having too much of a flavor that it's adding. If you want to do a half and half, or if you want to use like the Dea Jack blend, anything like that, yeah, that works as well. I just like having kind of a white cheese experience. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pot heated up just a little bit. And then in the meantime, while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and start slicing up some of these veggies. Now, I'm going to talk about kind of, I would say, a hack approach for some of these things, just because these are the kinds of dips that maybe you're chasing a craving, or you're trying to make a side dish at the last minute and you don't always want to make a run to the store. So I'm going to be talking about some of the things that we can do to, in a pinch, make something that will still be satisfying for this. So I'm going to go ahead and chop this up. Similar to several other sauces that we've made, how finely or roughly you chop this, that's your preference. I like it to be pretty relatively fine. So I chop them up to, just so you can see on the size here, about that. you can absolutely make it more fine. Just be aware that if you make it, if you're going to be putting a lot of fresh veggies in here, the more finely you chop, the more moisture these veggies are going to lose. And so that means, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can make a soupier mix. So if you're looking for kind of a really loose queso, then that's what you're going to end up with for this. So I wanted to use a fresh jalapeno or a fresh Anaheim pepper. I really, really love serrano peppers. I find them to have a very good flavor. I think that their heat is really, it's a nice balance. Sometimes with jalapeno, you can get peppers that aren't that hot. And then, 2 peppers in, you can get a pepper that's way, way hotter. The serranos are pretty consistent in their heat, but I wasn't able to get them from my store today. So that's fine. I'm going to use the hack, and I'm going to instead kind of approach this with my canned jalapenos. But as we saute stuff, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the exchanges that we do with that. If you have the availability, I really recommend using fresh everything you can for this. And one of the reasons is when we pickle something, which is what we're going to be using with those jalapenos, it changes the flavor profile, right? So if you think about the fact that if you were wanting to have cucumber for your salad or your sandwich and you didn't have cucumber, and then someone said, I've got pickled cucumbers, would that work? Or if you wanted carrot, or asparagus or green bean, and somebody's like, I've got pickled green bean, would that work? Pickled carrot, that's a very different flavor, right? Like it's a different flavor, it's a different texture. So the texture we don't have to be too worried about, because we are going to be making this into something that's a pretty easy going flavor compile, or profile. So we don't need to be too worried about that. I don't think that the pickliness is going to ruin it, but I also feel like it's not going to be in a situation where it really complements everything to its fullest extent, just because that vinegar is going to be present. And so with that vinegar being present, we are going to have a different flavor. Whereas if I had been able to get fresh, then I would just be getting the flavor of that pepper plus the heat. And now I'm going to be getting primarily the heat, and then after that, I would say, it's a tie. It'll be a tie between the heat and vinegar, and then with a background flavor or an accent of jalapeno. So it's a compromise. I think it's going to do fine in this dip, but just to let you know, because when this stuff all sweats out its flavors like we've been doing in all of the other sauces and soups that we've been making, it's going to be sweating out a different flavor than it would if it was fresh. You can see we don't have to chop this immaculately. We just want to make sure that we're getting everything broken up. If you do chunky, just be aware, if you did it with a bigger chunk of onions, they're not going to disperse their flavors evenly, which will be fine if you like that. And also, you just want to make sure everything is uniform. You don't want something that's cut like this and then have some big chunks in there like this, because this is going to still be raw and this is going to be mushy. So as is the same when we're talking about soups and other sauces and things like that, we want to make sure that everything is staying uniform. So I'm just going to finish chopping this onion up, and then we will toss it in our pot. We're going to be using a pot for this instead of a skillet. If you had a skillet and you didn't have a pot, you can make that work. Kind of like when we were making the country gravy, like when I'm making a beef gravy, I would typically make that in a pot. But when I'm making a country gravy and I'm making that roux and adding in so much milk, then I use a skillet. We can make either one work. So this is such an easygoing dip recipe that we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I've got about this much. And I'll hold it up here too so you can see. About this much peppers and onion. I'm going to be making a medium-sized bowl. My goal is to make a bowl about this size of queso. So again, if you end up like kind of tinkering around with some of the ratios, that's totally fine. So I'm going to be taking about half a tablespoon of my butter, my earth balance. Let me move the camera over so you can see what we've got going on. Let's see, there we go. Woo, spin you around a little bit, give you a little bit of vertigo. There we go. Okay, so you can see I wanted to put my butter in there when everything starts sizzling. Once the butter's dancing, go ahead and toss this in. And then just stir it just a little bit, get it mixed up. So our goal right now is we want these peppers and onions to start sweating. We want their flavors to start coming out. We want them to start softening. We're not looking for a crunchy queso. So that's our goal. We only need to cook this for, depending on how much you're making and how hot. I've got mine on medium right now. I would cook this for 2.5 minutes, roughly. And you don't need to stir it constantly. You just want to make sure that it's not burning on the bottom. Check your temperature, make sure, because that butter does have a high, or it's very sensitive, it has a low burn rate, so it can burn quite easily. So we look like we're good with that. Let's see here. Whoop. So just go ahead and keep that going. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up the can of diced green chilies. And I'm going to want to drain that just because as I was talking about earlier, I'm not here for that pickled flavor. I'm not looking to have that pickled juice or brine in this. And you can see it's got a lot of that juice in there. It's pretty juicy. So I'm going to go ahead and drain this, but I won't rinse it because we don't want to lose the flavor of the jalapenos. If we rinsed it, then this would just be mostly mush. So I've gone ahead and drained this. This is going to be one of the last things I add in the fresh food stage, just because it's already cooked. And if I put it in now, while this is kind of doing its sweating out of its flavors, the peppers would overpower all of this. And it would just become a pepper flavored soup that has some little crispy bits. So go ahead and give this a quick stir. And just let everybody know, this session's gonna be just a little bit shorter than some of our other sessions, just because we wanna recognize that these are things that you probably already have a pretty good idea on. So we're not gonna belabor them for an hour, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. You can always ask in the chat. So absolutely don't worry about that. So you can see like we've got some nice different sauces. I can see it's not just butter now. I've got some like different colors going on in here of that's everything sweating out. But when I try to break a pepper with my spatula here, I see it's still pretty crunchy and raw. So we're just gonna let it keep cooking probably for another minute or so. And then as this is done, we're gonna be adding in about, depending on how much garlic you like, but I would do probably about a tablespoon of garlic. But remember, as I've mentioned in other sauce and soup recipes, we always put our garlic in our saute step last because we only want to cook it for about 30 seconds. It cooks incredibly fast, it breaks down very quickly, it burns very quickly, and burnt garlic will give your queso kind of like a burnt popcorn aftertaste. It'll be subtle, but that's not what we're looking for. So just be adding in just a dash of that, and then we're gonna go ahead and put in all of the chilies. And this is also a time where if you wanted to put in some extra seasonings, you absolutely could. See how this is doing. Yep, that onion's still a little firm. So I'm going to take this time to go ahead and chop up my sad tomatoes that need to go. Because by the time I get them in there, they're not going, the liquid from the tomatoes isn't going to like stop everything from steaming and stop everything from kind of having its seal with its oil and sauteing. So I think we'll be fine with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and chop them up roughly about the same size as I was chopping up the onions and the peppers. And this is a great way to get rid of these pruny little tomatoes. As you might have noticed, I have a lot of strategies on ways to get rid of tomatoes that I don't have, I haven't gotten around to using, but I don't want to have them go to waste. And I think that it's possible that this is just a part of being up in Canada as well, just because they don't always have access to the freshest fruits and veggies that aren't grown directly here. So it can take a while to get stuff, which means stuff can go bad more quickly. So I'm not going to put all of my tomatoes in here just because I do have quite a lot, and I feel like that could change the consistency of my queso. But I am going to go ahead and add in, it's about a third of a cup. I'll show you right here. So you can see I've chopped them just in about quarters. Go ahead and add those in. And then because I really like spicy queso, like I was saying, this is when we're going to be adding in our seasonings as well. I have some dried habanero pepper. You could put in chili powder. You could put in taco seasoning. Just cumin is a really good one if you're just looking to build on something. So I just put in that, give it a little stir. And now we are ready to add in our garlic, and we're going to add in our peppers. So there goes my garlic. Adding in the peppers. There we go. And we're going to let this cook for about 30 seconds. The peppers are already cooked. The garlic really is just, it's going to cook up instantly. It'll actually probably get a decent amount of cooking just from ambient, being around the other stuff that is already so heated through. So this is already looking very nice and colorful. If you wanted to put in like some extra fiber or anything like that, you could have absolutely done some finely minced carrot. I also never say no to some finely minced kale hidden into stuff. So if you're looking to bulk up and make your queso a little bit healthier and more filling, cooking up a little bit of carrot and kale would go a long way. Wouldn't super change the flavor of this. If you put in the carrot, I would only put in a little bit because it is sweeter. So then it could add like a sweetness to it. But with the loudness of the peppers and the onion and the garlic and the seasonings that we're putting in, I think it'll be fine. And some folks like sweet, right? Like some people are making peach mango salsa and stuff like that. So putting in a little bit of carrot or finally chopping up some de-stemmed kale and putting that in there, great way to get some fiber and some additional vitamins in for that. So this is looking great. All my veggies are nice and soft, but we don't want to cook them to an oatmeal consistency either. So we want them to still have like a good mouthfeel. So now I'm going to go ahead and for starters, and this is something that you can tinker with back and forth, but I'm going to go ahead and put in about 1.5 cups of my almond milk. I don't want to put in a ton off the bat just because it's going to depend on my cheese and the flavors. Like we don't want to put in so much milk that there's no flavor. We also don't want to put in so much milk that it's really soupy, unless that's what you're going for, is a more watery or looser queso. So yeah, this is looking like a good amount of queso. And look how nice and pretty it is. And I'm going to go ahead and add in With this, I'm going to do, this is going to be about half of this package. And again, that gives me some reserve. So if it still is like coming across as a little lackluster, seems a little loose, I can add in a little bit more. But I'm gonna go ahead and add in about half. You don't, another reason we're not putting all of it in is because you don't want it to be one big block, right? Like some of us might have made queso in the past where it just turned into one big jello blob, essentially. We're not looking for that either. So this is a recipe that I really recommend baby stepping it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and just let this simmer. We're gonna check in on it in just a little bit. And I'm cooking this on low now, just because I'm not trying to saute anything. I'm not trying to make sure anything is getting cooked all the way through. We're just trying to have an even heating. So go ahead, turn that to low. You can cover it if you want. I don't think it's going to do any damage. I prefer not to cover it, so it's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and bring this over here now. Whoop. There we go. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to show you how to do a ranch dressing, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a ranch dressing and a Caesar salad dressing. And if you were wanting to do one or the other, or if you're wanting to do something that feels maybe a little bit more impressive, to feel free to go to either direction, whatever works for you. So I'm going to use my same cutting board here. And then for my bowl, you don't need anything too big. I would actually recommend, if you've got it, a low jar, just because we are going to be whisking a fair amount. So I'm going to make it in a jar this size. Then it's already ready to store and throw in the fridge here. But the first thing you have to ask yourself with this ranch dressing is, do you want this to be runny ranch or creamy ranch? So just if you're thinking about it, there are different places that have different styles of ranch. There are ranches where it's like if you were to dip a potato chip or a carrot into and then pull it up, you would have like, almost like a sour cream consistency. I often see that kind of ranch in the grocery store in the veggie tray aisles. Or are you looking for what I would refer to more as a steakhouse ranch, where it's like you get it, it comes in its little pewter metal cup for your salad, and it's very, very runny. It's much, much more liquidy. Everybody has a preference, so you need to ask yourself that, just so that you know what you're shooting for, and that's going to guide how much of each ingredient we're putting in. I like my ranch to be kind of in the middle. I don't want it to have like a sour cream consistency, but I also don't want it to be like water. So I'm kind of a Hidden Valley Ranch kind of person. So I'm going to start off. There's a couple things we can do here. If you've got some Vegenaise, or if you've got some Just Ranch, that's a great place to start. Also, if you had some Tofutti sour cream, also a great place to start. If you don't have that and you're looking to make it a little more Whole Foodsy, then I would go ahead and start with a block of silken tofu. And you're just going to end up wanting to work that with, I would say, a little bit of white wine vinegar or rice wine vinegar, maybe like a tablespoon and a half of that. And then just a tiny bit, like a fourth of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. And then I would put that in a mixer and I would mix it until it was really broken down, or blender, either one, till it was really, really well broken down. And I would put in a little bit of, you could do coconut oil, you could do avocado oil, a little bit of olive oil, or if you're trying to avoid processed oils, then I would probably do I'd find a nice ripe avocado. And then I would probably put it in the mixer with maybe a quarter of that avocado, and that fat going to be working in with the protein. I mean, what we're really essentially doing is recreating a mayonnaise-ish, right? Or an aioli, like what Justin showed us earlier. So we're taking a fat, we're taking a protein, which would have been the egg, and then we are blending it together. So we are going to create a cream with that. If you're looking to make it into kind of a hack, though, we're going to be doing that with our mayonnaise. So I'm just going to go ahead and for the amount of mayonnaise I'm going to make, I'm going to do probably about 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise. Put that in here. Before there were as many ranch dressing options as there are now, my husband and I would have our ranch dressing would just be mayonnaise and Italian dressing and a little bit of dill, and then just shake that up and go to town with that. That's what we would use in a pinch because there just weren't that many options. I'm just going to give the queso just a little stir here. But luckily, we are in a situation where we have a lot more options. So now I want to go ahead and add in our almond milk. And again, this is going to depend. Do you want it creamy? If you want it to be, thick, like it holds onto that carrot stick, you're probably not going to add much to this because you want it to be at that mayonnaise-y consistency. If you're looking for that steakhouse consistency, you're going to do a fair amount. I'm going to do about 1/4 of a cup. You can always add more. What you don't want to do is get yourself into a situation where you're chasing back and forth and then you end up with a gallon of ranch, which wouldn't be the worst thing, but it's not what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and just mix it using a whisk. Doing up here. We don't have to worry about like emulsifying it. We're just trying to get it equally blended. So this is looking just a little runny for my taste. I feel like I've got a little bit more milk than I would want for my mayonnaise. So there's a couple of different options we can do. One is I can put a little bit of flaxseed in there. So we'll go ahead and do that just for this one so we can see how that works out. So I am forever putting flaxseed, and I might have used up all of my flaxseed. I am forever putting flaxseed in anything that needs thickened up. So if our queso were to be too runny as well, toss some flaxseed in there. So I'm going to put in just about a teaspoon. That's actually closer to 1/2 teaspoon. You don't want it to turn into a jelly. Nobody, no matter how thick of queso they like, nobody is looking for a ranch flavored jelly. So go ahead and just mix that in, and then I'm going to add in my other seasonings. And if I need to add in mayonnaise afterwards, I can. So there's a couple different things we can do for shortcuts here. We can use just Lighthouse has a little salad dressing medley, and it's freeze dried, so it doesn't need to be refrigerated, which makes it great. You've seen me use this in several other things. So this has parsley, red onion, chives, shallots, garlic, dill, all right here. So if I wanted to make this fresh, I would 100% go get those ingredients and then put them into taste. You're going to want to do a lot of parsley. I know every once in a while you'll get like a nice dill ranch, but a little bit of dill goes a long way. So I'm going to start off using about a teaspoon of this. And again, a little bit of this can go a long way, and the flavors unlock the longer it spends in our dressing, right? So don't taste it tasting what you want it to taste like right now. Give it 30 minutes and then taste it, because these herbs have been freeze dried. So if you taste it and you're like, it doesn't have the flavor I'm looking for right now, then you're going to have an over flavorful ranch most likely. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of that. And then if you like garlic and you're looking for like a garlic ranch, I use this garlic sauce and spread right here. I know that this might not be available to everybody, so if this would be another great opportunity, you can use onion or you can use the minced garlic I used earlier. I would put in about a tablespoon of this. You can also use the dried garlic if you're looking for that. It's going to give it a little more punch, so that's up to you as well. But just milk, thickening, little tanginess with the mayonnaise and herbs is not necessarily enough. We're often missing a little bit more. And what that typically is onion powder. That's kind of the secret ingredient that kind of unlocks all of that. So I usually start off with just about 1/4 of a teaspoon. and mix that in. And I am going to add in just a touch more flax. Let that thicken up. The onion powder is kind of, again, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of the secret ingredient, just because it's not something that your mouth realizes you're tasting, but it is kind of mixing everything together. It's kind of the unifier. So it is enhancing the other flavors. So yeah, that's looking good. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit for just about 5 minutes. So that way I can see if that flax that I added has done enough. And I'm going to check in on our queso here and bring you along for the ride. Let's see here. Here we go. So you can see we've got, like, even though I used a white mozzarella, you can see that it turned into a nice queso color. It's nice and goldeny. It's got that kind of Velveeta mix. So this is, again, another kind of crossroads that you have to make a decision on. Do you want your queso to be like kind of when you get at a restaurant? Sometimes it is a little bit runnier. And you want it to be something that you're going to pour over a burrito, or do you want it to be something that's like a dip, like you get at the store, that you stick in and a bunch of it stays onto your chip? So that is going to depend on what you do here. So if you want it to be restaurant style that comes in a big bowl, or that you're going to drizzle over a burrito, this is great. If we want it to be a little thicker, get that flax seed. I'm going to go ahead and put in just about a tablespoon. And I'm going to go ahead and mix it in. And then I'm going to remove it from the heat. And we've seen that through with the gravies and the sauces that we've made. Sometimes you have to remove it from the heat to see how it's going to settle. We need that vegan cheese that we put in here to have time to kind of, like, all that ingredient, the tapioca starch, everything else that's in it, to kind of breathe and not be bouncing around all super fast because of the heat. And then it will thicken. So I've turned off the heat, and I'm just going to go ahead and let this set. And then, you can always give it a good taste and see if this has got the flavor profile you're looking for. If not, maybe add in a little more chipotle. Add in, you can also always mix in a little bit of salsa as a pinch if you're looking for that hack. So move back over here. And we're going to check in on the ranch. This ranch is still pretty liquidy for me. You can see it's kind of dripping off my spoon here. Let me bring it up here. So you can see it's pretty drippy. So this is probably the consistency that I would call the steakhouse ranch, a little bit light on that. So I am going to add, I'm going to put in a little bit of the sour cream, just because sometimes I like the zing that goes with that, which you get a little bit more of than if you put in mayonnaise. So I'm going to do just about a tablespoon of that. Now, if for some reason you were in a situation where you did not have Italian dressing and you did not have a frozen medley of veggies or the herbs, and you did not have fresh herbs, you could also always, in a pinch, put in pickle juice. You could do your mayonnaise, your garlic, black pepper, onion powder, and like half a teaspoon of pickle juice. And that's going to give you that dill and a little bit of the vinegary kick. And, obviously you would still put in a little bit of your almond milk and stuff like that. But that's the direction I would go with that. Okay, so this is thickening up. This is looking better. It's still a little loose, so I can make one of two decisions. I can put in a little bit more flaxseed, or I can put in probably another 2 tablespoons of sour cream, and then we would be there. I also always like to do just a little dash of black pepper, which is nice. The vinegar, if you do the pickle juice also, it kind of gives that buttermilk ranch flavor, because we aren't using buttermilk. You could have added a little bit of rice wine vinegar. If you don't have rice wine vinegar, I would do apple cider vinegar, but I would not do white vinegar, or I would not also do a wine vinegar, like a white wine or a red wine. just because I think that's going to cut through a little too much. But a pickle juice would be fine because it would give that tartness in that background for that, but it also is mostly giving you that dill flavor. So let's go ahead and do one final check on the queso. I'm actually going to bring it over here. I was just reading up and talking to Jacqueline about the history of ranch dressing and how it was from the 50s, and it was started by a plumber who had retired early, and he went to Alaska to do plumbing. And while he was there, he thought, I really want to make food that keeps my crew happy and excited and feeling invested, but there's not a lot of access to fresh fruits and veggies and things. So I'm going to make this dressing with these dried herbs. And then it just really took off. So the gentleman who made it is the person who made Hidden Valley Ranch, and it actually was made at a ranch when it started, which is where he had gone to retire. And then he was just making it as a hobby because he remembered how much his crew had liked it. So you just noticed I put in, it ended up being about another cup of the cheese, just because it was still a little thin for my flavor and palate. And it's thickening up really nicely now. So this is starting to get to the texture that I would want it at. I think this looks like it would be great for drizzling over a big bowl of beans and rice and sauteed veggies or a burrito. I think it would look great for putting in with some chips. If I wanted this thicker, I would go ahead and put in the rest of the cheese. If I was trying to minimize putting in my cheese flavors or having extra things in there, then I would go ahead and put in probably another tablespoon of flax and just let it sit for another 10 minutes. As you might be able to see, there's still a fair amount of steam coming up off of this. So this hasn't really cooled enough. And I feel pretty confident that in about 10 minutes, this is going to be like a nice thick dip. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. If you don't have any questions, you can always email me at danielle@nwveg.org. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good weekend.